send Chad an invite on Google Plus because they're pretty savvy on that. Then they can jump on and be part of the discussion.
Okay.
Are we live?
Yes, we are. Hello.
Hey. Hey, everybody. We are here with, so far we have Bo. We're going to have David Poole on if everything goes as planned. A little bit of a challenge with a couple of them getting online. And we are going to have Doug Salisbury, right, Bo?
Yeah, hopefully he'll make it on here shortly.
Yeah. And so I think what we want to do on some of these calls is see if we can get into some actual projects, actual submissions that people might be having come in. Right now David is working to get online. David Poole, he has a project. It's a short-term transactional funding project, and it is a true transactional funding based on what we've seen so far, because the funds will not be released until escrow receives the other funds in its place. And so that's what we, at least what I consider true transactional funding, is, again, when we know that the title company will not release your funds that you put into escrow until there are replacement funds under their control, 100% under their control. They'll release your money in exchange for the money that they give you. So that's why I always say that, I don't know if you'd agree, Bo, but I consider transactional funding to be probably one of the safest investments one can do if it is truly transactional funding.
Absolutely. I think it's a matter of having good escrow instructions and making sure your title officer follows them properly.
Right. And just while we're waiting for David on this, on the actual deal that he brought in, I would recommend that if it's not a Chicago title or a Fidelity title or someone that is well known and around, I would recommend that one checks to make sure that they are licensed and insured, bonded, so that in case anything were to happen, that you know that your money is secure based on their bonding. Have you worked with that at all, Bo?
I actually have not had a need to do transactional funding, but I always use one of the top title companies always to do all transactions to make sure that everything's insured properly.
Yeah. Okay, and so maybe I'll just start describing a little bit of what David has here, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but what it is, it's an A to B, B to C transaction. And David can correct me if I'm wrong when he gets on the call, but the idea is that the buyers of the property need to show that they have funds available to fund their deal. And so what they're doing, they're requesting that David put money into escrow, and again, those funds will not be released until the new money is actually in that same account with no restrictions for the title company to release it. And it's going to be up to a term of 30 days. And the reason for that is it just takes that long for them to be sure that they have enough time to get the paperwork done on the A to B part of the transaction. So what I recommended to David, what we talked about was, since there's not 100% guarantee that the buyer will come through, there is a guarantee, pretty much a guarantee, that the money would not go anyplace. But what happens if for some reason the buyer is not able to perform and they, let's say they just, whatever reason, they can't get the funds into escrow? I suggested that that David put into into the contract that the points and the points or the fee for actually putting the money up is put up by the buyer. So in this case, I think it was a couple of points. So the buyer is required to put money into escrow with instructions that that money is to be released to the lender, which in this case is David. And so the main reason for that is otherwise, if 3.5 weeks from now the deal doesn't go, David had put that, I think in this case it's 450,000. He would have put that money into the account, left it there for 3.5 weeks. Then all of a sudden the deal doesn't close. Then David has now put money up for 2.5 weeks without any compensation. So by making sure that the fee for doing the work has been put up before the money is put there, it assures David that he's going to be able to
I
get
don't know, honey. I think you need to.
compensated for it. Hi, Carol.
Hi.
Hey, we can see you.
Oh, great. I don't want to be seen. I don't mind being heard.
Oh, you're looking great.
Oh, thank you. That's kind. That's after a night of flying across country.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
I've been trying to help Doug get on unsuccessfully, so I think I'm just going to listen to the call and tell him about it.
Okay, yeah, maybe, yeah, if you could do that, and
Yeah.
there,
Okay,
if you
bye,
don't
honey.
care to be on the screen, you can click that video button. Just stay on.
Okay, thank you.
Click the video, and then from there, at least we can talk about the details of your deal as well. Perfect. Okay,
Okay,
so
good.
you're still there, Carol, right?
Yes, I am.
Okay, great. And Bo, who is it that controls the screen so that whomever is talking stays up there?
I'm controlling that now. I've got you locked on.
Okay. All right.
Tom, I'm sorry to interrupt, but you know what I'd really like to do is could we have Doug call in?
Sure.
Okay, let me have him call in.
I think
To
so.
your line?
Let me ask Bo
Sure.
to answer that.
Yeah, he can just call your phone, Carol, and
Okay.
if you put it on speaker,
Okay.
it'd be
Perfect.
fine.
Okay, let's do that. I'm calling him right now.
And while you're doing that, Carol, we'll just go a little bit further on David's project.
Okay.
So Bo, did everything that I described there, did that cover the general?
Yeah, I think so. It was pretty straightforward. We just
Okay, so listen.
it's nice to get paid if you're going to go to the trouble to find somebody's deal. So
Yeah.
I think
So I'm going to put you
it's a
on.
good point you made.
Okay,
Get that money up front that
Okay.
it's going to pay those 2 points. So
Yeah.
Right now they're talking about a deal David has, but I'll let them know you're here.
Since you have Douglas on the call, let's maybe do that first. Carol.
Okay, Doug, Tom just is addressing you.
Okay, let's see if I can hear him.
Can you hear us, Douglas?
do you have it on speaker, Carol?
It is.
Right put it near the microphone on the computer.
Okay. Doug, can you say something? Can you hear that?
No.
No.
Okay, wait a sec. The speaker, I'm trying to find the speaker near the computer where that. I'm sorry, you guys, I am technically challenged here.
No problem. David,
Yeah.
are you still on the call?
I'm still here, but I can't get connected.
Where is the microphone on my computer?
Okay.
I honestly don't know.
Okay. See if they can hear you now.
Can you hear me?
No.
I'm talking now. Can you hear me?
Now we can just barely hear you, yes.
Oh, good.
Okay, and maybe Carol, you might have to interpolate a little bit too or whatever.
Okay, sorry about that.
Oh, no problem. Would you be able to just describe what the project is? And our goal here, I guess, is to take a look at a project when it comes in. What are some of the key things that we look at when a project comes to us when we get started? And Bo, certainly feel free to jump in at any point here as well.
Okay.
Okay, what we have here is the borrower is subdividing the property that his primary residence is on.
Okay.
And he has received, the subdivision has been approved by the city, and he has applied for the permit. His objective on the new lot that was created is to construct a new single-family residence.
Yeah. Okay, so I'll repeat that for anyone that may not have heard it. So what we have here is a borrower that has called into Douglas and submitted information to Doug and Carol, and he's got a property that he currently lives in. It has enough room on the property. The lot was big enough that he was able to split the lot in two. The home luckily was far enough to one side where it can now be what was one lot can now be a second lot. So David, we see you now. So great, good to see you. And so what the borrower has asked for is they've asked Doug and Carol if they can finance him to build a new home on the separated lot. The city has approved all of the dividing plans for dividing the lot. And did that accurately cover it, Doug?
Yes, it does.
Okay. When Doug and I were talking about this, one of the first questions that I had on it was, is the property owner occupied right now? And if it is, what is the current financing on it? Because I think it's important to make sure we stay in compliance with as it relates to owner financing, but there's a possibility that the current lender may release the separated lot for a certain dollar amount or a certain pay down on the land. Have you had any luck on that question, Doug?
No, what we've got now is not whether, he hasn't responded back about whether the primary lender, there's actually 3 loans right now on the property.
Okay.
And so, right now the loans encumber both lots.
Okay, can you describe the rough dollar amount of each of the 3 loans?
Okay, one loan, the primary one, is for just over $2 million. The second one is for about $330,000, and the third one is for about $200,000.
Okay. All right, and the primary one, if I remember right, that's a conventional loan. Is that correct?
It appears to be a conventional loan.
Okay.
And the second one appears to be a line of credit.
Oh, second maybe a line of credit, and
Right.
the third?
I'm not quite sure what it is. It seems to be with a private party, not an institution.
Okay, so private party. Okay, and now and we'll just walk through this and maybe again, Bo, David, feel free to jump in. But what I'm doing is I'm kind of I'm just showing you kind of my mindset and what I go through when I'm evaluating a deal. So again, please, guys, feel free to jump in whenever you have comments or questions. So the value of the property as it sits right now, what is that, Doug?
So we're still, I've requested, and we're still waiting for appraisal on both lots.
Okay.
But the borrower estimated $3 million for the lot.
Okay, so the home with the lot with the home would be how much?
Well, that I'm not sure on.
Okay, so you're just pulling out the lot itself as a 3 million. Sorry, Doug.
Okay. I'm not sure. We're waiting for the appraisal on both lots, the one with the house and the new one, and we haven't gotten those yet.
Okay, but for now you're estimating the vacant lot as how much? Is that the 3 million?
Yeah, the borrower estimated it at $3 million.
Okay, so and the way I usually do this is on the first go around, I go by what the borrower says, and I do all of my very initial evaluation based on what the borrower says. And then when we start talking, I make sure that I'm always saying, based on the information you've given me, this is what it appears we can do, but obviously we need to verify the numbers. And by doing it that way, we're not spending a ton of time going out trying to do comps on something that we have no idea if there's even a chance to make it work. So we'll just go a little bit further on this one. So let's say that the lot itself is worth $3 million, and I know that a lot of people that are not in California, we realize that the numbers are certainly a lot higher. Just take a zero off, and it's probably a little bit closer anyway. So the lot is for $3 million, and how much was construction estimated at?
He's estimated construction and soft cost at $1 million.
$1 million. And when we're doing this, just keep in mind this one happens to be new construction, but really the process of evaluating this deal is pretty much just like the process of evaluating a rehab property. So we're gonna get the 5 key numbers, and so we're going through them right now. We've got the purchase price, which in this case we're saying the lot value would be the purchase price, so that's $3 million. We're saying that the construction costs, or in some cases rehab costs, but we're saying in this case that it's $1 million. So the next question I would ask is, do you know how many months he believes it's going to take him from start to finish on this project? And that includes all the way through to resale to the closing on the final sale of the property.
If I recall correctly, he estimated construction at 6 to 8 months, complete deal 8 to 10 months.
Okay. Right there, my question, I might suggest that would be a little bit short based on what I'm seeing in California. But let's just say, for calculating purposes, let's say 10 months. And I'll go through my thought process. I'm thinking, well, if he says 10 months, that may not work, but we're probably going to want to have a 10 to 12 month loan, and then probably have a couple of potential extensions with some pretty high fees for those extensions, so that it keeps the pressure on for the borrower, that they understand the importance, because when the importance of getting the project done. Because when you think about it, if there's a loan going on the property, a couple $1 million loan, it's going to, what is that, about $800 a day in interest. So that really eats up profits very quickly if it doesn't happen here quickly. So now the next number that I would look at is, what is the down payment, or what is the money that they're putting in? And in this case, the way I would look at it is, since the borrower already owns the property, he doesn't really need to buy it, but there is going to likely be a fee that he has to pay in order to get a release on the first position. Do you have any estimate, Doug, as to what sort of a partial release fee they're going to want on that?
No, I don't.
I think, do you remember what we had done when we did our initial calculations? Was it maybe, let's just say it's $500,000.
Okay.
So we're going to take a $3 million purchase, or existing value. We're going to take $1 million as construction, and then if it's $500,000, we'll say let's say it's going to cost him 500,000 to take it down. What I do then is I take the 3 million, subtract 500,000, and I put 2.5 million in as cash in, because that's an equity position that they have. Bo, David, are you following that? Am I clear on that?
Yeah, I understand what you're
Yes,
doing.
I appreciate the Tom.
Okay, so
We've had a similar deal.
okay, great. And so, and we're going to say, for this we'll say 10 months, and then the final number. So those are 4 numbers. Number 1 is purchase price. Number 2 is construction costs. Number 3 is cash in by borrower. Number 4 is how many months. And then the 5th one is sort of the obvious one, and that is the completed value of the project. What do you show on that, Doug?
5.5.
5.5. Okay. So I think what we'll do here, if you can see this, can you see it, Bo?
Yeah, you're up. It's up.
Okay, should I, so what I'll do is I'll just put the numbers in, and this is a calculator we have, but it's one that, again, it'll show kind of how we go through the process here. So in this case, we're going to put $3 million purchase price, because that's what the current value is. We'll put $1 million as the construction cost. And again, in this case, we're going to put $2.5 million down, because that's what he already has into the project as equity, assuming that it's only $500,000 that the bank needs to release that particular lot. There's no cross collateral here, and the after repair or the completed value is $5,500,000. And let's start out with 10 months. Be aggressive on the. Again, what I'll usually do is I'll probably put 12 to 14 months. Question mark. Just so that, and what I do, I just put that in there so it reminds me to think it through as I'm going through the process. Now, Doug, have you done any checking at all as far as what new construction, what first position new construction might be available?
No.
Okay. I'm going to guess that there's probably going to be about 70 to 80%. And here we're talking, and if I'm getting too much into detail here, Bo, David, Doug, just let me know. But again, I'm just going through the process as I normally do. What we do at GCA anyway, we try to get a first position in at a good, solid, fairly high dollar amount. And in this case, I'm going to say that I think we could pretty easily get 70% of. Yeah, I'm actually going to say probably a lot of times what new construction, what they'll do is about 70 to 75% of cost. So we're going to be at about 1.5 million. Is that right? Yeah, that's about how much cash is needed. So that's about $1,050,000. Okay. Bo, you've been doing some of this. What are you seeing in the market for a possible first position on something like this?
As far as the interest rate, or
no, as far as
the
amount, like the loan to value, loan to completed value.
You know, the banks are so across the board, but there's some that are more aggressive than others. So I think you just have to search for the one that's going to give you the 75%. But certainly 70 is, I would think, the average.
Yeah, I did just see today, I saw an email come through from a first position lender that we've been involved with earlier, and they showed even 90% loan to cost, which is really, that's the first that I've heard of anything that high, but in this case I think we'll go at about 70%. So we have the first position up in the right-hand corner, I put 1,050,000. We're going to put 12% interest. The default numbers here are 12% interest and 5 points. Any of these numbers can be changed, so let's say we go to 4 points. And then the second position, which is usually the position that we take as a gap funder or basically a second position lender. And we're going to keep it at 5 points. Generally speaking, about 3%, and that includes closing costs, construction control. It may be a little bit less than that, but I'd rather estimate a little bit high. And then about a 6% sales commission is what I'm estimating, and we'll keep it at 50-50 profit split. So with this particular calculator that I use, and Bo, you have one fairly similar. What we do is we just add in the numbers up on top. Obviously, we'd put the city and the name and the date, but we enter the numbers in the top 2 boxes, and that drops out the results in the bottom 2 boxes. Sorry for the flickering here. So we look at it, and the first numbers that I go to, right here, you'll see that the second position comes in at about 755,000. Typically, if I was doing this deal, I would look for a first position that I would try for 1.150. And all I'm doing here is sort of playing around with it, trying to get the second position a little bit lower, because what we're doing in this entire project, we're making sure that this calculator builds in interest reserves for both the first and the second. And so the way I look at it is that even though we've got, for us, it's probably better for us to have a smaller second, because we're making sure we control the first as well. Generally speaking, you don't want to have too much of a disparity in the loan to value, or the first. You want to watch the ratio between the first and second, especially if you're not putting interest reserve in for the full term. But I look at it as that if you are putting interest reserve in for the full term, then I like to get a lower second position loan. So in this case, I think 650. Here, I generally try to get in at about 500,000 or less on a second position. It doesn't always happen, but we'll just continue on this one. So I look at line 28, and that's the amount of second position is at about 654. Then I jump over to the loan to value, loan to completed value. That's at 29.5%, which is really good. And the reason it is that is obvious. It's because there's so much value in the land, but there's not very much owed against the land. And so we're at about 29. That's on the right-hand side, line 29. We're at about 29.5%. And we are at, let me see if I can get David here. David?
Yeah, I got disconnected. Is this the right phone number?
Yeah. Are you able to click on there's a microphone, and there should be a microphone on your screen where you should be able to hear us based on just off of the video.
Well, it says I'm muted because number of participants.
Okay. All right, then I'll just keep you on speakerphone here. Cool. Okay, so then the next thing, so the first thing I go to is what is the amount of the second position, is that within range? Second thing I go to is a loan to after repair value. That's certainly in line. Next one I go to is the net profit. We want to see at least an 11% net profit. That's our business model, is we want to see at least 11%. And we are at 615,000 estimated based on a 5.5, so we're in that range. We should be just fine. But then you look at the potential profit on it. This one has a pretty substantial upside to it if the numbers are correct. Let's see, what else so those are really the basic numbers. Here on the left-hand side, it just breaks out what each of the different numbers are. Again, these are the numbers that fall out when the input is put in up on the top. Any of you guys have any comments on this part so far?
It's pretty straightforward.
Quick question, Tom. Was the property already owned? Did you say that at the start? I missed that.
Yes, the property was already owned by the borrower. Yes.
Okay, the $500,000 to the bank to get a release. What was that for?
That I just put in a number just because we don't know yet from the bank what they're going to. The loan itself right now, this is an owner-occupied home, and the loan itself is against the entire property. And because we want to make sure that we aren't dealing with owner-occupied, and we want to make sure it's a first position for the construction lender, we need to know that they are able to do a partial release from that main loan in order to be able to release the this particular lot.
I got it. Thank you, sir.
Yep. And let's see, what else do we have here? So, Bo, you were going to say something?
No, I think
Okay.
you spelled it out pretty clear. The
Okay.
numbers don't lie.
Yeah, and let's just try it here once. Let's say that the bank requires $1 million pay down. Then what we do here, we would take the borrower cash in instead of 500,000. We're going to take instead of 500,000 off of the purchase price, we're going to take $1 million off of it. So that leaves $2 million in equity into it, meaning about $2 million cash in. And we look down here, it shows this, and this actually is not going to be, first impressions, if you look at line 28 on the left-hand side, it says amount of second position. It's a huge 1.26. I still would look at the first position lender, because I have a feeling that they are going to be fine with a higher loan because of the value of that lot. That their loan to value is still going to be very, very low, even if let's say we put 1.8 million up there. That gets us back to about $600,000 as a second position. And this is really, it's a good one to play around with. The difference again between this one is that the lot is already, it has a lot of equity into it, and it really is going to depend on how much the bank is going to require for the pay down. But let's just say that the first position would do 1.8, which I'm guessing the lenders that we're working with, based on what I see here, I'm guessing that they probably would be fine with it. A lot of times they'll do certain, they might even go a little bit higher because they know that they have us as a second position behind them, which actually adds security to them.
I think it has a lot to do with the location of the property and the days on market. I mean, it's a high-priced house, but if there's a lot of inventory moving in that price range, that's going to make a difference on how far they're going to go up.
Absolutely, absolutely, very good point. And that's related to this entire project here, is that none of us on the call here probably would ever do this project if we didn't know that there was a very high demand for properties, so that it would likely sell within 30 to 60 days because of the high carrying costs on something like this. So then we look at we go down to the bottom right, loan to after repair value or loan to completed value, 39.3. That's still certainly fine. Profits are still nice and strong. So the idea is that any of these numbers on the top left-hand side and top right-hand side, those numbers are all inputs. They can be adjusted, and you can really play around with it and just see where the numbers come out. So, Douglas, did we cover everything pretty much? Do you have any thoughts, comments to add?
I think we've pretty much covered it. Yeah, because the verbal that Carol and I got from the borrower on what he was basing his $5.5 million on were properties within 3/4 of a mile of the property, and they've been selling. There was probably about 3 to 5 places that sold, and they were within like 60 days.
Okay.
Market.
Okay. Good. Yeah. So definitely making sure that it's a very short time, estimated short time on market. So now that we've gotten to this point, the next thing that I typically would do, and Bo and Doug and David, please add any comments here. Next thing I typically would do is, now that I have these numbers, I will send a short email, and I try to do it in an email format or some sort of a written format once we've had either discussion or somehow to get just the basics as an understanding with the borrower, so that we want to try and alleviate any potential misunderstandings, miscommunications. So typically in this case, I might kick an email back to them saying, interesting project, looks like based on the numbers that you've provided and subject to verification of these numbers, it appears that we could potentially do the project, and then I would add a few things like what our interest rate is, what the points are, how the project pays for all expenses in our case, and then from there what the split on the profits would be. And so again, so it might say something like, based on the numbers you've seen, based on the numbers provided and subject to verification, it appears that we'd be able to do this loan at approximately, what do we have here, total loan with interest, a loan of approximately, this is on line 26, a loan of approximately 2.4 million, and I would say something like the interest rate of 12% and 5 points would be charged to the project, and the profits would be split 50-50 or whatever the terms are. And I would say, is this something that looks like it's is this something that you'd like to look at taking to the next level? And then they'll respond back and saying, well, no, they really don't want to share in the profits, or they think this or think that, whatever it might be. Or they'll say, you know, that sounds good. What's the next step? Let's say they ask, what's the next step? What I'll do then is have another, probably a quick discussion with them, just to make sure they don't have any specific questions. Then I would put together a term sheet. And this is a non-binding term sheet that we use. I don't know what you guys use, but I always use a non-binding, but I do ask them to sign it. And the reason for that is that when things are early up front on a project, the borrowers always seem to be overly optimistic. They get excited about a project that's working, that's happening, and sometimes some things are missed. This way, by putting it in writing, we actually have come to a meeting of the minds, and we are able to really show that down the line if at any point somebody says, well, I never knew that there was going to be 12% interest, I thought it was going to be 10%, whatever it might be. It's at least in writing and can be referred back to. Bo, Dave, Doug, any comments on that part?
Not for me.
Now, Homa is saying, Tom, do you convert the SAM to per month back-end points with the borrower?
Good question. We very seldom do that, but one of the things we have been doing occasionally on projects is, rather than going with a percentage of the SAM and then having to do all the calculations at the end, we have on a couple of occasions gone to just a straight number of a percentage of the sale price. So when you think about it, a real estate agent, real estate brokerage, when they sell a house, they get 6% for selling the house. What we've done in a couple of cases is we will tell the borrower, we are interested in doing the deal. we would do it, but we would like to get, and whatever the number is, let's say it's 6% of the gross sale price as our portion of the profits, or as our SAM. So we're basing it on a net, or basing it on a gross number. And when you think about it, it's actually, sometimes it can be easier to sell it that way, because if you compare, if we look at the numbers here on this deal, we're at 11% profit. Half of 11%, which is half of the profits, would be 5.5%. So I would think I should fairly easily be able to have a discussion with the borrower, at least from my perspective of having been a borrower. I should pretty easily be able to talk about getting at least as much as a real estate agent or brokerage does for selling the house. I would get that for financing a house that likely other people would not be able to do under the terms that we're able to do it. So we're going a bit beyond what a hard money lender would do, and that's why we're able to share in the profits. So rather than saying half of the profits, to say a 6 or a 5% of the gross sale price, at least in my mind as a borrower, I wouldn't flip out quite as much, I don't think, if I was told that my lender, who's getting a deal done that nobody else would do, is willing to fund it for the same or even maybe a little bit less than what a real estate brokerage would do to sell the property. And that's been pretty, at least in the couple cases where we've used it, it's been certainly accepted pretty readily.
Hey, Tom,
Yep.
how much time are you spending helping them get that $1.8 million first? In some cases, there's, it's a good idea to control, probably in most cases, a good idea to control that first position versus having them out hunting and trying to find alternative financing.
Yes, yeah, a lot of times we'll definitely try to be involved with bringing in that first, because just like what you said, we're able to work with friendly lenders. As George always says, make sure you know your first. And we had a project just recently where we learned that lesson pretty well too, where you just really have to know what that first position is about, make sure that it's a friendly first. And but yeah, that if we can take control of it, the other thing we're usually able to do is get a little bit higher loan to value, because they see us as a lender in a second position coming in. And again, we like to leverage up a bit that way. Did that answer the question, do you think?
Yeah, Homa had another question about when you're figuring your 10 months or your 12-month term, said shouldn't you add a 20% buffer to the term length?
Oh, good point. Yeah, so I didn't go through that. I put a comment, or I put the comment here on the calculator, but really before I would do this deal, I would suggest that it be written up, unless they really are convincing me that they can do it in 10 months, I'd probably put it in at 12 months, and then in my notes I would put plus 2-month extensions, and those I generally do at 2 points per month for the first 2 months, and then 3 points per month for the second. M-O-N-T-H, for the second set of 2 months. And as you can see, that's really aggressive, but I can always go down when the time comes and the project has taken a little bit longer. If the borrower really has not done anything, if it was acts of nature, whatever it might be, I can always go down on those points. But what we really want to do is make sure that we've got plenty of pressure on that contractor and that borrower, because otherwise it just isn't urgent enough for them. So really putting the provisions in for the extension if needed, but really making it get their attention, if it does go into that period. Because again, a project like this, what is this? Let's say it's a 1.8 million or 2.4 million. That is right around $1,000 a day in interest, and so you really want to make sure that they are aware of it on top of it. The other thing I should mention here is that we almost always put 15% under the construction cost. So instead of $1 million, it would be $1,015,000 or $1,150,000 as far as the construction amount. So, but yeah, that's a good point.
Tom, quick question on Bo's question that you just explained regarding the penalty if it goes to the extension penalty.
Yep.
Do you do that on the total loan amount or just on your second position?
No, I do it on the total loan amount because we are responsible for that first position. If the borrower doesn't get it done on time, the first position likely may not have enough interest reserve in there, and so we would definitely want to make sure that it's high pressure for both points. The way I word it is on unpaid loan balances.
Okay.
Yeah, Tom, one other thing that we had talked about was, again, in addition to that pressure, to put in there like about a minimum profit.
Ah, yes, yep. So in this case, we are looking at about a $234,000, just assuming that that's where the numbers come in. Generally speaking, what I'll do is I will put about 90% to 95% of this lender's share of profits. So in this case, that might come to about 225,000, maybe 200,000, somewhere in that range as the minimum lender's share of profits. Again, all of these numbers, they can, if something happens and there just is no profit left for the borrower, and it was not a delay or some issues that was caused by the borrower, you can always go down with them, but you really, again, you want to keep the pressure up to make sure that I was a general contractor for a long time, and so I know what it's like to try and I mean, it takes a lot of pressure to force the subcontractors on the job, keep them going, and you just have to do it with a big stick like this. Or at least that's my experience. So then we've now done this. We've sent them the term sheet. They've signed the term sheet. The next thing we do is we immediately, once they've signed the term sheet, then we get them a copy of the line item budget, the draw schedule, and the scope of work. We want them to use our forms because we want the consistency. Our inspection services are used to our forms. They really, and they fill in the gaps. We know what we want. We know what we need. So getting them to fill those out as quickly as possible. As soon as those are filled out, then the appraisal and the inspections are ordered, and they are ordered at the time that they're ordered. The inspection service and the appraiser gets a copy of the line item budget and the scope of work so that they can use those when they're determining. The appraiser needs them to know what sort of finishes, what sort of amount of work is going to be done to the property. So that's really critical for the appraiser to have it. And the inspection service needs it because they need to know when they're inspecting the property and when they're evaluating the line item budget as to whether there's adequate funding to do the work that they're planning on doing. They really need to know that ahead of time. Otherwise, it's kind of a shot in the dark as to whether they're hitting it based on the correct amount of work that the borrower plans on doing. And then, so the borrower pays for the appraisal and they pay for the inspection only at the time that once a borrower has paid for the appraisal and the inspection, they've put anywhere from, I don't know, say $700 to maybe $1,500, depending on how extensive the project is. At that point, once they put cash into it by paying for those services, only at that point do I really dig into the project to make sure that the values are there, to start really digging into what they're estimating. Up to that point, I've probably done maybe about a half hour of work, maybe an hour, half hour to an hour of work on the project. And again, because I want to shift it over to the borrowers so that they are the ones that are doing the background work. If they trust their numbers and they trust what they've done enough to pay $700 to $1,200, whatever that number is, for those services, at that point, then I'm confident enough that I can spend some time and start doing the due diligence, or have my team start doing the due diligence. And then from there, it just if everything starts to vet out and look solid, then it progresses through the process. Any of you guys have any thoughts on that part of it?
No, I've always enjoyed understanding your program, Tom, because I think it's very step-by-step and very logical, so everybody can understand. And just going back to a quick comment regarding when you were telling us about possibly presenting, instead of a profit split, that you get a set percentage. In more recent conversations that I've had with potential borrowers, that's been received much better than saying I'm expecting you to split your profit. So I think you are onto something there, and I think that's far more palatable by most people.
Yeah, great, good. Yeah, and it's sort of the logic of like comparing it to what a real estate agent pays, right? Or even in some other cases where it is back-end points. Generally, I don't go straight to back-end points of the loan amount. I like to go back-end percentages of the sale price. So, but thanks, David. That's helpful.
Hey, Tom. Robert's asking, are you typically asking for completed drawings then at the time the scope of work is being determined? So, I mean, at some point, if you're doing appraisal, you probably already have plans, but so there's a big gap in there.
Yeah, we want to make sure that the plans are far enough along so we will know what is in the project. So I would say, as a general rule, the plans are going to be pretty well completed at that point, which is generally the case. Now, sometimes what they'll do is if they're still vetting the deal, or if they're still checking out the deal to see if it may work, we may go through and they may bring in a set of plans and specs from a similar house to what they're looking at, and that way we can give them a good idea on the initial run. But once the appraisal is being ordered, at that point we usually have a pretty good idea whether, especially on new construction, we'll have a pretty good idea whether the numbers will work.
Mm-hmm. Do we want to discuss the transactional funding here in the last 5 minutes?
Sure. Yeah. Any comments on the other part, Doug, before we move on your project? All right. And do you remember where we were on the transactional?
Well, we were just talking generally how it works.
I just asked you a question, honey.
Oh, okay. Go ahead.
Okay. Sorry, Tom. Doug didn't hear your question.
Oh, we were just going to wrap up your project and move on to the transactional funding project that David had on. So I just was checking to see if you had any last comments.
No, I appreciate the discussion and everything, and I think we've covered about everything. In this case, we do have the architectural plans for the new house.
Okay, good. So you have enough detail in them that the appraiser and the inspection service will be able to do a good takeoff on that.
I think so.
Okay, good. All right, well, thank you, Doug and Carol. Appreciate that.
Very welcome.
And so David, David Bowe, I don't recall exactly where we were on this.
Well, we didn't have any numbers.
We just explained it. Sorry, go ahead, Bob.
We didn't have any numbers. We kind of talked about generally what transactional funding was, but that was it.
Yeah, and because this is true transactional funding, when David and I were looking at it, we spent very little time looking at the numbers on the project. And the reason, and this is the way I approach it, and I'd be interested in hearing your guys' opinion. I approach it as that if it's true transactional funding, there is no, it does not depend on the value of the properties, except for that it may mean that the deal is more or less likely to actually get funded in the end. But the way it's being set up now with David is the money that David would be putting in is put into escrow. That money will not move any place until there's other funds that replace that. And the only way that those other funds will replace that is if the title company does it based on what your instructions to the title company are. And so if David gets paid the points up front when he puts the money into escrow, I would argue that it really does not, very little due diligence is required on the property, very little is required on the borrower, because the payback has virtually no what's the word I'm trying to think of? There's no tie-in to the property. It's really the only condition for that money to be released is if there's other money sitting right beside it that will allow it to replace it. So that really is the only, that's why I think it's so important with true transactional funding to make sure that that one document, which is a set of escrow instructions to the title company, is absolutely perfect. And that's why I would always have an attorney draw that up. And but really the project itself does not have a bearing on that particular investment.
It's just a line item on the HUD-1, really, and you have to assume that both parties have agreed to that number, right? And it's an in and out transaction. The money's really not going anywhere. Right.
And so it may sound weird, but I would use the analogy that I don't, if it's a $500,000 loan and it gets put into escrow with that set of escrow instructions, I really don't care if it's a mobile home or I mean, I really don't care what that is, because it's not, there's no bearing on it other than if I get a fee for it, and that's why I suggested to David that the fee be charged up front before anything ever happens. So hopefully that didn't confuse too many people. Did we have any questions on that part, Bo?
No, there was one. So this is when a borrower is doing simultaneous closing on a property, which is yes. Correct.
So it's almost it's simultaneous, except for the fact that the money has been put into that escrow account. Like in David's case, it'll be an escrow for up to 30 days, but nothing ever happens to that money, so it is a simultaneous close. It's just that it gets pre-funded for the simultaneous close.
And 2% I think is the general fee for that transaction, isn't it? Have you seen more than that? I think I've heard more, but
2 to 3, and sometimes depending on the situation. Early on I had heard 4. This was probably about 2-3 years ago, but that was when money was so tight. But really, 2 to 3% seems to be the going rate.
I've heard the same thing, Tom. 2 to 3.
Yeah. Okay. David said that he's heard the same thing, 2 to 3. And so what David and I are doing right now, we're working with the broker on it, getting the docs that he is proposing. And the reason we want to do that right now is to make really sure that his interpretation of transactional funding is the same as ours. So if he comes up and says, well, we need a note, and we need a mortgage, or a note and a deed of trust, and we need to sign these disclosures and do this and that, to me it's not transactional funding. To me, then you go right back to a full due diligence packet. You go through and do every bit of due diligence that you would do on any other project, because then the project is relevant. But if it's just one document that is a sort of a lender or a escrow instruction document, that's at least the way I see it. So, and if anybody has any questions on this afterward, feel free to post them either on the blog, which, Bo, is that, can you just give the information on the blog? And that's where this video will also be posted.
You can go to the ateamhangout.com.
And there's no dash in there, just ateamhangout.com.
.com, correct. And then the password is ateamapprentice 2013. So that'll get you in, and then there's a place that you can post questions, or if you've got topics that you want to discuss, we'll receive an email. We can answer those questions.
Yep, and also feel free to post them on the Apprentice site if that's handy, or I think a lot of you probably have our emails, so certainly happy to take any questions that you have on that. David, do you have any other questions, comments, or thoughts?
No, I thank you for explaining it so well at the beginning. I'm sorry I couldn't get connected right away.
Yep, no problem. Thank you for participating, and Doug and Carol, thank you very much too. So we're just a couple minutes after 5 o'clock here. So Bo, if you don't have any other questions on the board, I think we'll, if that's all right with you guys, we'll probably sign off. I just want to respect everybody's time and try and keep it to 1 hour. And again, if anybody has any questions, certainly feel free to connect with us. So, anything else, Bo, on your end?
No, we're good. We're going to sign off.
Any announcements we want to make or anything? Should be on again next Tuesday, hopefully. We had last week. My flight was delayed, so it was right at the time when the A-team was going to be. So we missed that. But
well, I did post in the email that I sent out this week that if people have deals, we can do these on an ongoing basis. So they can certainly email me, and I'll try to.
Great. Yeah, if anybody can comment on the A-team or any place, A-team or the Apprentice site, really comment and let us know if you like this. If it's of value, we certainly plan to keep doing it. If you want something changed or if you think something else would be better, please make sure you let us know. Want to make it valuable for everybody, and anything that we can do to make sure that we're getting the right content, right information out. Love to be able to share that with you. So with that, I guess David, Doug, Carol, Bo, I guess we'll sign off. Thanks everybody for joining us, and until next week, happy lending.
Thank you all.
Bye.
Thank you.